Today we're going to talk about chapter 21 through 24, test review. The first discussion is about the digestive system. Digestion begins in your mouth, where you have salivary glands and you have enzymes that begin digestion. You then have wave-like contractions in your digestive system, which move food along. This is called peristalsis. If you were to throw up, that would be reverse peristalsis. We've discussed in lab sphincters, and you're aware that there's sphincters at the top of the esophagus and the bottom, and in your stomach, and in the anal area. These sphincters are rings of muscle that allow for passage one way. Whenever you have digestion occurring, we've traced the path of food. It's going to be your mouth, then your esophagus, and that upper esophageal sphincter is going to be there, and then the esophagus, and then the lower esophageal sphincter. And then the food is going to enter your stomach, and you have the cardiac sphincter, the cardia, then the fundus, then the body, then the pylorus, and then the pyloric sphincter. After your stomach, you go to the small intestine, and you have the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. And then all the undigested food will pass through the colon, or large intestine, and out the rectum. There are two types of digestion: mechanical and chemical. And when you're digesting that food, you're going to form a ball of food that's going to go down your esophagus, and that is called a bolus. Those salivary glands we already mentioned have some functions. They neutralize acid, break down starches, kill bacteria that may have been ingested with your food, and helps form that bolus, that ball of food. You're going to have a lot of absorption that takes place in your small intestines, and the undigestible food is going to pass through your colon. Now we're going to talk about the respiratory system, chapter 22. Who has more efficient lungs, humans or geese? The answer is geese. The process of gas exchange is called respiration. Respiratory surfaces need to be all of the following: thin, moist, and capable of diffusion of oxygen, and capable of diffusion of carbon dioxide. You're going to want the oxygen to go in and the carbon dioxide to be exhaled as waste. Earthworms use blank for gas exchange. They use their skin. Specialized body parts for gas exchange include gills, tracheal systems, and lungs. Fish and a raccoon do not have capillaries, and that answer would be false. They do. What is the purpose of gills? Gills increase surface area, increase surface to volume ratio, and are an extension of the body. In fish, gas exchange is enhanced by ventilation and countercurrent flow of water and blood. So it's going to flow not toward each other to where it like interferes with each other. It's going to flow around in kind of like a pattern in opposite directions. Which holds more oxygen, cold water or warm water? That would be cold. Which holds more oxygen, fresh water or salt water? That's going to be fresh water. Which holds more oxygen, still water or turbulent water? That answer is turbulent water. An operculum is what? It is a gill cover. Why is air beneficial to breathe out on land versus in water? Well, it's because air on land is lighter, and the air on land has more oxygen than the oxygen that is available in water. Grasshoppers have air sacs. True or false? The answer would be true. Birds and mammals have higher or lower metabolic rates. They have higher metabolic rates. Birds and mammals have more complex lungs or less complex lungs than other animals. It's more complex. In mammals, the nasal cavity performs what function? It filters. It has air and mucus for filtering. It warms the air, moistens the air, and the nasal cavities also detect odors. What are grape-like clusters at the end of your bronchioles called? There's your alveoli. Bronchus divide into bronchioles. Alveoli have lots of capillaries. Oxygen diffuses into blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out. This is a continuation of the respiratory review. True or false? Mucus and cilia protect the lungs. True. Smoking accounts for what percentage of all lung cancer? 90%. Smoking increases the risk of what? Heart attack, stroke, higher blood pressure, or higher cholesterol, or all of those? The answer is all. When inhalation occurs, the diaphragm moves which way? Downward or upward? It would move down. Inhalation causes pressure in the lungs to decrease or increase. The answer is decrease. During exhalation, the rib cage does what? It contracts, and the lung pressure increases during exhalation or breathing out. Residual air in the trachea, the bronchi, the bronchioles, and the alveoli. In other words, the amount of air that's always in there that you don't breathe out. That is called dead air. Birds have less or more dead air. They have less dead air, and that's due to a one-way flow of air. In your brain, you have the ability to sense and respond to carbon dioxide levels in your blood. So when the carbon dioxide levels in your blood change, your brain can sense this. When your blood pH gets lower, your rate of breathing will increase or decrease. The answer is increase. The right side of your heart has deoxygenated blood, and the left side has oxygen-rich blood. And that is because it has went to the lungs to pick up oxygen. In respiratory systems, gases move from high concentrations to low concentrations. What is this called? This is called diffusion. Most vertebrates have iron-containing hemoglobin that transfers oxygen, buffers blood, and transports CO2. So most vertebrates have that hemoglobin, which helps with functions of transferring oxygen and transporting CO2 out of the body, and then buffering that blood, which means keeping it the right pH. A fetus uses lungs to breathe. True or false? False. They don't use lungs to breathe when they're in the womb because their lungs aren't inflated yet. But blood and oxygen go to the lungs in order to allow those lungs to start developing. But they're not inflated until the baby is born and takes its first breath when it cries. Fetus and mom share the same blood. That is false. What attaches mom and fetus? That's the placenta. And the reason we're discussing this in the respiratory review section on this slide is because the placenta supplies oxygen and blood supplies oxygen, and the lungs are part of the respiratory system. This section has to do with circulatory system. In humans, we have a double circulation. We have a pulmonary circuit and a systemic circuit. So we have blood that has to get through the heart out to the lungs, pulmonary system or pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary because pulmonary has to do with the lungs and picking up oxygen. Then we have systemic circuit, which is going to then take blood back into the pulmonary veins, back through the heart, and out to the entire body, or the whole body system, which is why it's called systemic. Within your body, you have arteries that carry blood away from the heart. Where do veins carry blood? They carry blood to the heart. Then you have smaller vessels known as capillaries, which convey blood between arteries and veins. You also have smaller arteries known as arterioles and smaller veins called venules, but the smallest are capillaries. Capillaries form what when they all form in a big cluster? They form capillary beds. Where are the atria in your heart, top or bottom? They're in the top. They're the top two chambers that just receive the blood. Where are the ventricles? They're at the bottom. So the two chambers that do the pumping action are at the bottom, and they're also thicker chambers. Fish have how many chambers in their heart? 2, 3, or 4? They have 2. Turtles, snakes, and lizards and amphibians have 2, 3, or 4 chambers in their heart. They have 3. Humans, crocodiles, and birds have 4. What prevents backflow in the heart? You have a tricuspid and a bicuspid, or a mitral that we've talked about. Those are valves. Your circulatory system has some functions. It receives nutrients, supplies those to your body, helps to get rid of gases, and helps to remove waste. Most animals do not have blood, heart, and blood vessels. True or false? The answer is false. False. Most of them do have blood, heart, and blood vessels. Arthropods have open or closed circulation. It's going to be open because they don't have a bunch of vessels with the blood inside those vessels. Humans have what type of circulatory system? Closed or open? That is closed because it's closed within a bunch of capillaries, arteries, veins, venules, arterioles. In order to get blood into your right atrium, blood enters through what 3 structures? Superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and coronary sinus. The pulmonary arteries carry blood to your what to pick up oxygen? Lungs. The pulmonary veins carry blood that is oxygenated back into your heart, into the left atrium. What is the largest artery in your body? Aorta. Diastolic and systolic are the 2 numbers when you read your blood pressure. Diastolic is when the blood is coming from the veins to the chambers. Systolic is when the blood is going from the atria to the ventricles. Your blood pressure is the pressure on the walls of your vessels. What is a defective valve which permits backflow in your heart? That is a problem called a murmur, a heart murmur. Your heart has electrical signals. Generation and relay of electrical signals in your heart are due to 2 structures: the SA node, or sinoatrial node, and the AV node. What does an ECG do? It records electrical changes in your heart. What do AEDs do? They shock your heart. What is damage or death of cardiac muscle? That's a heart attack. And cardiac muscle is in your heart, and that's the only place it exists in your body. What is death of brain tissue? That is a stroke. Atherosclerosis is fatty deposits in vessels, which can build up and block those vessels. Arteries don't have valves, but veins have valves. What do valves do? They prevent backflow. They keep blood flowing just one way. Blood pressure is the force on what? You just heard this earlier. It's the force on your vessel walls. Blood pressure is the highest in what vessels? Arteries or veins? That is arteries. Blood pressure is the lowest in veins or arteries. That's veins. If you have high blood pressure, what is it called? It's called hypertension. High blood pressure causes each of the following: stresses on your heart, higher amounts of plaque in your vessels, blood clots, heart attacks, strokes, and possibly kidney failure. Blood cells are suspended in what? Plasma. Plasma is what percentage water? 90%. Red blood cells have a proper name. What is it? It's erythrocytes. Leukocytes are what type cells? Those are white blood cells. White blood cells have functions. They help to fight infection. They gobble up bacteria. And when they do this, it's called phagocytosis. Do you produce higher red blood cells at higher elevations? You do, because your body senses you have less oxygen and your body will produce more. And sometimes you can produce too many and it can cause problems. Can anemia cause you fatigue? True or false? Or yes or no? Anemia can cause fatigue. Can anemia cause low oxygen? Yes. How does your blood clot? Well, it has these spiky little structures called platelets, and it also has types of clotting factors known as fibrin, fibrinogen, thrombin, and prothrombin that allow your blood to clot. And if you're a hemophiliac, you could be missing one of those. Cancer of white blood cells is called what? That is called leukemia. How many types of white blood cells do you have? 2, 3, or 5? You have 5. Multipotent stem cells are unspecialized, and can they replace themselves? Yes or no? Yes. Lymphoid stem cells aid in what body system? Your immune system. Myeloid stem cells can differentiate into what 3 things? Red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. This slide is about your immune system. Your first line of defense against disease is, of course, your largest organ, which is your skin, which helps provide a barrier from the outside. Your skin has chemical and mechanical types of actions that allow your body to protect itself from outside invaders. Your first line of defense against disease is, of course, your skin, but you also have mucous membranes, stomach acids, hairs, and cilia that all aid in protecting you from bacteria, viruses, pathogens, and issues from the outside world. Macrophages are large phagocytic cells. What are substances that resist viruses called? Those are interferons. Invaders can rupture due to body's response systems. So basically what that means is when you take an antibiotic, antibiotics kill bacteria, and one way they do that is they make holes in the cell wall, water rushes in, the osmotic pressure gets really high, and the bacteria literally explode inside your body. You also have been told before that antibiotics can also interfere with protein synthesis, which is one other way that bacteria can be killed. It's dependent upon what type of antibiotic you are prescribed as to what protocol that antibiotic will use to kill the bacteria. But remember, antibiotics are not living. They cannot go in there, have a brain, and decide what to kill and not kill. So when you take an antibiotic, it's important to take a probiotic because antibiotics can kill all your good bacteria too. Viruses need a what in order to survive? They need a host. When you get a fever, is that your body's reaction to try to fight off an invader? It is. Some small grade fevers can be beneficial because your body is trying to heat up and kill off the invaders. So fevers can stimulate phagocytosis, which is gobbling up of all of the bad things in your body. You can get septic shock. And septic shock is an overwhelming inflammation or inflammatory response to something. Lymphocytes are a type of red blood cell involved with your immunity. True or false? The answer is true. The 5 types of white blood cells in your body are, in the order of the most that you have in your body, are neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, basophils. The way you can remember that in the order from the most numerous in your body to the least numerous is never let monkeys eat bananas. Along with your immune system, you have your lymphatic system with lymphatic vessels and lymph nodes, and those pick up all the plasma that leaks out of your vessels, picks it up, turns it into interstitial fluid, and turns it into lymph, which gets filtered by your lymph nodes and then gets dumped back into your circulatory system. So your lymphatic system helps to collect up stuff and filter it through your lymph nodes and then ship it back out. Antigens are specific foreign substances that try to invade your body, and then your body can fight it off with antibodies. You can get certain types of immunity in your body. Some passive, some active, some acquired. They all differ. Acquired immunity produces antibodies. Active immunity produces its own antibodies. Passive immunity is when you get pre-made antibodies, like from your mom if she breastfed, because when women breastfeed, the antibodies they've built up in their body can be passed on to their developing child, which helps to keep their child from getting sick because it's passed on through the mom. There's also humoral immunity, which is when B cells in your body secrete antibodies. They secrete those B cells out to the blood and the lymph to sites that have been infected with bacteria and viruses. So humoral immunity involves what type cells? B cells. What do they secrete? Antibodies. Where do they secrete it to? Blood and lymph. Blood and lymph where? To sites of infection. What type of infection? Any type, but specifically bacteria and viruses. You also have something called cell-mediated immunity. What type of cells does that involve? That involves T cells. What do those T cells attack? They attack cells that are infected. So what does cell-mediated immunity involve? What type cells? T cells. B and T cells fight against invaders. And you also have memory cells in your body. And those remain in your lymph nodes and can last decades and sometimes a lifetime. So how long can memory cells remain in your body and lymph nodes to fight against invaders that it sees or recognizes? It depends, but some decades and some for a life. A primary response or primary immune response is the first time you're exposed to something and what your body does. A secondary response is the second or fourth or 10th time that your body has been exposed to something, and it will respond faster because it has memory cells. But your body doesn't necessarily react the same all the time to every single type of invader, because obviously and apparently some are worse and require a more crazy reaction and a more urgent reaction than some other types of invaders would. Cytotoxic T cells attack infected cells. Helper T cells help to activate T and B cells and macrophages. So helper T cells help to activate what cells? T and B, and macrophages, which are big phagocytosine cells that gobble up foreign stuff inside your body. Activated helper T cells promote an immune response. So if your body is invaded by something, these helpers help out. So the helper T cells promote a response. They're like, hey, wake up. Something's going wrong. We got to do something. So that's what your helper T cells do. They help to activate your body, punch it into action. HIV will destroy helper T cells, which is why people that have HIV get sick whenever they're exposed to every little thing because they don't have these responses in their body like helper T cells to help them out. Perforin. Perforin is a substance in your body that can make holes in infected cell membranes of invaders to try to increase that osmotic pressure and kill the invader. Cytotoxic T cells may help to prevent cancer. Each person's cells have particular self-protein fingerprints, and this is really interesting. Each person's cells have particular self-protein fingerprints. So your cells have its own type of recognition system and its own type of fingerprints. And this basically marks them off limits for lymphocytes. It marks them so that your body can recognize how to make a response in your immune system. No two people have these identical self-protein fingerprints, except for twins. And this is the issue with what happens when someone gets a organ transplant. It gets rejected unless you take anti-rejection medication because your self-protein fingerprints aren't the same as the organ that you've got. So due to these differences, your body wants to attack that foreign organ. So you have to take anti-rejection medication. Sometimes your body can have a response that it doesn't really need to have. It has it and attacks yourself. So autoimmune problems turn against your own body. Stress, of course, will weaken your immune system. Stress has currently, in a lot of research, shown that stress affects everything about your body. Increases heart attacks, increases strokes, affects your whole body, mentally and physically. Allergies. If you've ever suffered from allergies, it can be awful. And you can have to have allergy shots and take medicine. Feel tired and sluggish and sneezy and stopped up. And it can be mild or it can be really severe. But allergies are pretty much an overreaction to environmental conditions or antigens. And it causes your body to release histamines. And that causes your body to have that reaction. So it releases histamine and it causes these allergic reactions like sneezing, etc. The initial response, or the initial, not the response, but the initial time, the first time you're exposed to an allergen, something that causes you an allergic reaction, is called sensitization. Sensitization. It's always hard to say. Sensitization. So that's sensitization. Sensitization. The last thing that we're going to discuss is anaphylactic shock. If you get a severe enough allergic reaction to something, so if you have a huge overreaction to something that you've been exposed to, you could go into anaphylactic shock, and that can be fatal. So it's really important if someone's allergic to something that you be very careful around them. There's a lot of peanut allergies nowadays. A lot of people have allergies to wheat and eggs, and it just depends on the person, but it's something to be taken very seriously. I hope this review helps you, and I will see you next week in class.